my name is Hannah Bradley. I am a PhD student at Oakland University, working under Vasil Tabokovich. And today I will be talking about neuromorphic pattern recognition using antiferromagnetic artificial neurons. First, let's talk about antiferromagnets. As the result of their anti-parallel spin patterning, antiferromagnets, or AFM materials, have a natural frequency in the terahertz range. This allows them to be used to create very fast devices. These frequencies can be excited by a spin current applying torque to the magnetic sublattices of the AFM. The exchange energy between the sublattices changes, which allows for these terahertz frequencies. The spin current acts on both magnetic sublattices and causes them to rotate. But the biaxial anisotropy of the AFM causes this rotation to not be uniform. The rotating spins create a spin pumping signal, the magnitude of which is proportional to the rotational speed. And the non-uniform rotation at this terahertz frequency results in a sequence of very intense, very short spin pumping spikes. The orientation of these sublattices can be described by using the angle phi, which is the angle between the Neal vector and the EZ axis. The derived equation for phi resembles the equation of a mechanical pendulum under a driving force, where the driving force is the spin torque from the spin current. The anisotropy gives the equation its potential, while the damping is an inherent result of the material properties of the AFM. But the most important part of this equation is that the exchange energy contributes an effective mass, which leads to the AFM oscillator having inertia. The oscillator can now act as an inertial particle under a driving force, where again, that driving force is the spin torque from the spin current. When the current is at a supercritical level, the oscillator will continuously oscillate by itself, continuously outputting spikes. But let's consider the case where the current is at a subcritical level and not enough to send it into an oscillation alone. With an additional pulse of current, the oscillator can act like a neuron, overcoming the energy barrier and causing a single oscillation. At the bottom of this sinusoidal path, the change in the angle phi is the fastest, which results in an output spike due to spin pumping. Like all systems with inertia, the rate at which this particle goes through the oscillation is dependent on the strength of the driving force and the additional stimulus. Now the oscillator can act as a very fast artificial neuron, always ready to go and to be set off by an external signal. They were unlike conventional artificial neurons because of this inertia. We can connect AFM neurons together so that they can be set off by one another. In our simulations, we use an arbitrary coupling matrix to determine the strength of coupling between the neurons. Linking up multiple of these AFM neurons in a chain allows the output of one neuron to act as the input for the next. So an output spike can travel like a wave through the chain. In conventional artificial neurons, there's an immediate reaction as a result of an input, but the inertia in AFM neurons causes there to be a delay between the neuron receiving an input and the resulting output. The synapses used to couple these neurons are constant and easy to implement. A simple copper bridge would be able to carry a spike of spin current from one neuron to the next. This is great when creating simple AFM neuron circuits like inhibitors and memory loops. However, variable synapses are needed to create more complex neural networks. So now we can create AFM neurons and link them together. The next step would be to start building neural networks capable of more complex functions. Constant coupling synapses are easy to implement, like the copper bridge. But variable synapses, more complex, are not as easy. A new way to combat this need for more complex synapses is to make use of reservoir computing. In reservoir computing, there exists a reservoir where multiple neurons are all interconnected with each other. However, all these connections are constant. This reservoir would be able to receive input and to do all calculations needed. The only thing left to do is to filter out the relevant information, and this is the job of the output layer, the only layer in need of more complex variable synapses. There are many ways to encode information in reservoir computing. Many standard machine learning algorithms use rate-based encoding, where the frequency of spikes within a time window is used to encode the information. However, this would be difficult with AFM neurons. The refraction time of AFM neurons would cause unintentional inhibition of important spikes within the time window. So instead, reservoir computing with AFM neurons, we use temporal encoding, where the information lies within the timing of the input spikes. We make use of a system called Spike Pattern Association Neuron, or SPAN. The patterns will be made by a 4x4 grid, where each cell corresponds to an input neuron that will fire if the pixel is black. The input neurons are directly connected to a single output neuron via trainable weights. Our goal is to create this neural network that will be able to recognize symbols made from this grid. When the correct symbol is inputted, the output neuron will spike at a target time. And when the incorrect symbol is inputted, the output neuron will spike away from the target time. We achieve this goal through training the output weights. During training, the neural network is fed a library of images made from the input grid of neurons. The SPAN algorithm will train the weights and work to move the output spike towards the target time for the correct image. The SPAN algorithm is based off the Widrow-Hopf or delta rule. This rule uses the difference between the desired spike time and the actual spike time to update its weights. The lambda is a real-valued, positive, and constant learning rate. The higher this learning rate, the more aggressive the change in weights are. The final equation for a SPAN algorithm is shown here, and we can see it in the graph. The takeaway from this equation is that when the actual time is greater than the target time, the weights will increase. When the timing is the same, the weights will stay the same. And when the actual time is less than the target time, the weights will decrease. This figure shows how each synapse from the input neuron to the output span change over each iteration of training. Each weight is initialized to a random value between 0 and 1, and the SPAN algorithm is modified to not allow any of the weights to become negative. This will ensure an easier implementation in hardware. As training progresses, it is clear to see how the weights change as they try to move the output spike towards the target time. After training, when the correct symbol is fed into the neural network, the AFM span will spike within a 10 picosecond time window of the target time. And when the incorrect symbol is inputted, the span will spike outside this target time window. Therefore, we have successfully trained this neural network to recognize symbols made from this grid. Multiple AFM spans can be connected to the same input neurons, while still being trained individually and without affecting each other. Each span would output a spike at the target time when its own correct symbol was supplied, while the other would spike away from the target time. With multiple spans all spiking at different times, the output can be unclear, so we construct an output layer to filter out unwanted spikes. This output layer consists of fixed synapses, thus preserving the reservoir computing requirement that only the synapses connected to the output layer are altered during training. However, these synapses are weak, such that a single spike will not be able to propagate to the next neuron. There must be 2 spikes at the same time in order for the postsynaptic neuron to fire. The clock neuron, shown in red, spikes at the target time. This spike joins with the spike of the span corresponding to the inputted symbol to cause a strong enough signal from the postsynaptic neuron to fire, leading to a single output spike. Shown here is the output spike pattern of a 2-span neural network. The blue and green spikes correspond to spans trained to different symbols. You can see the clock neuron, shown in the red filling, spikes at the target time along with a single span. Because the other span does not spike at the target time, there is only one output spike that corresponds to the recognized symbol. This neural network allows for multi-symbol recognition with a clear output in just a few hundred picoseconds. Our next step is to extend this concept to handwritten digit recognition. These digits are encoded in 28 by 28 grids and in grayscale. The span algorithm and neural network are most likely too simple to handle this kind of input, so we are working on finding a new learning algorithm and neural network that would be better suited for handwritten digit recognition. In summary, AFM materials resonate in the terahertz frequency range and can be used to create ultra-fast neurons with an effective inertia and low power consumption. A span makes use of the delta learning rule to train output spike times to target spike times. And the AFM span neural network can perform recognition tasks based on symbols made from an input grid of neurons. Thank you for your attention, and I will take any questions.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I don't know if we have questions.
I can ask a question.
Yeah, go.
You were mentioning the idea of having reservoir neurons.
Mm-hmm.
Is this span training those reservoir neurons? So is this algorithm using those?
Yeah. In our neural network, it's really simple. It's a two-layer neural network. There's inputs and there's outputs. So we actually don't have a reservoir in our neural network. The part of reservoir computing that we are using is the fact that only the weights connected to the output layer are trained.
Okay. And in an experiment, how do you control those weights? Like
that's a great question. Currently, this is all theoretical work. We are basing our work off simulations.
Right.
If we're going to transfer this to an experimental, changing those weights might have to be something more complex than a copper bridge, something with electrical elements to change the resistance possibly to have variable synapses.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
We have a question in the chat. Is it possible to get no output spike due to spike from span and clock neuron not being synchronized?
Yes. So for this output neuron, for this output layer to result in a single output, we have two spikes have to be at the same time. If there's some sort of error, maybe the span isn't trained properly, or something goes wrong and the span neuron does not spike within a certain time window of the target time, the clock neuron and the span will not be able to combine to create an output spike. So there is an element of error that might result from this output layer.
It's certainly very interesting. I don't know, Petra, if that answers your question. Well, yeah, we have time for another question.
I have another question. Very simple, probably very stupid, but why is a neuromorphic computer better?
Yeah, so traditional computers, how they work is they have to transfer data from like a computational element, a CPU, to memory. So as processing happens, data has to transfer back and forth, back and forth. That wastes a lot of time and energy. So neuromorphic computing gets rid of the fact that data needs to be transferred to and from memory because there's no central memory unit. Their neurons serve as individual processing. They're connected by the synapses, and then computation is done through training those synapses.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Hannah, for a very interesting talk.